And welcome back to the Touchline Talk Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content I put out on YouTube every single week. Some more transfer talk and just some other kind of news items I want to discuss here in the second segment. The one transfer I had not gotten to yet, Tim Weah appears very, very close to joining Juventus. Seen videos of him in Turin. Seems a matter of time before he's officially announced as a Juventus player. On one hand, this looks kind of strange, as a guy who was starting about half the time for Lille, moving to Juventus. On the other hand, if there is a time from a playing on the field standpoint to move to Juventus, it is now. There's obviously the off the field stuff, the fact that, they're not in the Champions League, the points deduction, all of that. But it provides this opportunity because this Juventus team just isn't all that impressive right now. And so, if he's only starting half the time anyway, it's not like you have to take a big step forward for this move to be a success. Right? He doesn't have to start every game. If he can just get consistent playing time, like he was at Lille, he will be playing at a better club, in a better league, and having about the same role. And it seems like he's going to play some wing back again like he did at Lille. That'll be interesting to see what that looks like kind of at the highest level. When you're playing, your AC Milans, your Inter Milans, that kind of thing. So to me, I don't see all that much risk with this, is really kind of where I come down on this move. Partially because the bar just isn't that high in terms of him being able to do what he did at Lille at Juventus. And also because if this doesn't work, you just regroup and you go again and you find a new home. If he's just not a guy that's going to be able to cut it at the very highest level, that's fine. I feel like he's got enough stock and enough equity built up that this move isn't decisive unless it is in a good way and he kind of sticks at Juventus. I don't see it being a train wreck, and even if it is, to me there's a way to come back from it, which is a very different situation than, for example, Christian Pulisic, who already had the disastrous move, finds himself in as he's trying to find his next club. So I don't see too much downside with this. And it could end up being a really good move. So I'm kind of all for it. I don't have typically I have some reservations about this, just on the surface, of a guy who couldn't consistently crack Lille's starting 11, then moving to Juventus. But the situation at Juve makes me much less concerned, and Tim Weah just seems to find a way to make it happen. Nobody was really viewing him as this lockdown starter for the U.S. men's national team. And I don't know if you're going to find many people at all who want him out of that starting 11 now. He just continues to produce. And I feel like that's going to bode well here in this situation. I'm willing to bet on him. He's got the, go take this one opportunity, see if you can go cut it at the highest level and make yourself a fixture in this team. And if you do, fantastic. And if not, he's still, early 20s. He's done a lot of impressive things. He's a starter for a very, very good national team. He's going to be fine if this doesn't work out. To me, it is absolutely a risk worth taking, and I'm very curious to see kind of what position he plays and how this all ends up working out. Then we get to the bizarre situation with David De Gea and his contract. So he had reportedly agreed to a contract. Then Manchester United kind of backtracked and are now offering a different contract that he has not signed, and now it kind of seems like he's going to leave. That's my understanding based on the reporting I've read. what I want to talk about here is just the process part of this. If you're Manchester United, why are you kind of going back and forth on whether David De Gea is your guy and whether you want to extend his contract? Why are potentially, as I was kind of reading in The Athletic, this idea that, maybe the FA Cup final and the fact he could have done better on those goals sort of scared them away from that contract? Why do two more potential mistakes or situations where David De Gea could have done better swaying your opinion? You know exactly who he is. He's been there forever. You see it week after week. He's a terrific shot stopper. He's one of those goalies that can go save you a game, save you 3 points, win you a game anytime he takes the field. He also can cost you 3 points or 2 points or 1 point because he's error prone and he's not good with his feet. Either you're okay with living with that or you're not. You didn't need the end of this season to see that. He was exactly who he was 2 seasons ago this season. Now, there's 100% justification in Erik ten Hag wanting to work with him and get a feel for him, without making, not that you needed to make that decision before this season. But as you got wound down here in March, April, May, you just needed to be decisive. And they weren't. They were going back and forth. And if you decide to make your offer, don't pull it back. You just got to make a decision and go with it. I totally understand why De Gea is really frustrated with this. And there was no way that you were going to allow him to continue to be on the wages he was on because he's just simply not worth that. But it seemed like that part had been figured out, and he accepted that too. And there was an agreement in place. Either he's your guy or he's not. And keeping him as number 2 to me was just never a good idea. Unless he is okay with that and he explicitly tells you. If I were United, I would have been moving off of him. I have a fundamental philosophy when it comes to goalkeepers that my priority number 1 is don't cost us games, don't cost us goals. I need to be able to trust you game in, game out. If you can steal us points and rob the opposing team of goals, even better. If you can't, that's okay. If you're really good with your feet, fantastic. If you're not, that's okay. It's why I want Matt Turner. From the beginning, I wanted Matt Turner starting over Zach Steffen for the U.S. men's national team. I don't care how bad you think Turner is with his feet. He doesn't make mistakes. You never, relatively speaking, compared to other goalkeepers, you never sit there after he concedes a goal going, he could have done better there, or what a terrible mistake from Matt Turner. He also happens to be a world-class shot stopper. But I want the fundamentally sound goalkeepers, and that's not David De Gea. He's the roller coaster. Some brilliant, some baffling. That's just personally not what I want. If Ten Hag does, then they should have just gotten this done and stuck with it. You can't let the things that you should expect to happen change your mind. Don't ask De Gea or expect him to be somebody he's not. And if you can get an Andre Onana deal done, to me this isn't a conversation. And if I'm Ten Hag and I'm looking at the way I want my team to play, and I'm seeing the mistakes that De Gea made last season, and I think that Andre Onana is available, that is 100% where I'm going with this. So it all might end up working well for United. But they will have gotten incredibly lucky that it did. Because this was poor process from the beginning. They just couldn't make their minds up, and now it's this really bizarre, awkward situation with, this long-serving kind of foundational part of your team. And It's hard to convince him that you really want him the way you've been treating him, but also you were communicating that you did, and now you're saying you didn't, as opposed to just saying it was time to go our separate ways and making it a clean break. So we'll see what happens. It seems very much up in the air right now, but strange coming out of Manchester United, and just another reminder of the growing pains United are still going through from a club kind of organization and leadership standpoint. Speaking of organization and leadership and chaos, I also wanted to touch on everything going on with Canada right now. 3 different things I want to point to here. First, Canada Soccer General Secretary Jason DeVos made news recently by saying that the phrase he used was due diligence needs to be done about the possibility of declaring bankruptcy. This is at the same time that the men's B team, you took away some of your higher profile guys, but still a good team with recognizable names on it, fell behind and then conceded the stoppage time own goal to draw against Guadalupe in their Gold Cup opener. And your women's team, the defending gold medalists, aren't getting a World Cup send-off game because the Federation didn't have the money to pay for it. I was also reading about Richie Larea getting sent away from the Nations League in economic class or whatever, the economy class. I think that's what it was. That he didn't even get, business class seats. I believe that's what I read. And the explanation was, it's not that the players don't deserve that, it's that we don't have the money to pay for it. And of course, on top of all of this, you also have CBA negotiations going on and all of the tension with the women's team that is just continuing to heighten as the men's team had all of their issues heading into the World Cup, and now you're seeing the same thing with the women. And it's hard to kind of piece through all this, because at least some of these comments suggest that this is just failure, that there's nothing malicious about it. They just don't have money. Which asks a lot of questions of how in the world did you let a federation that has experienced plenty of success here, the women consistently, but of course with the Olympics, the men's team qualifying for a World Cup for the first time in forever, topping CONCACAF qualifying, really capturing the country and getting everybody excited. And you have no money? And I always try to be sensitive to understand the other side of this, because money is a big deal. It's easy to sit there and say, well, why didn't the Federation organize a send-off game for its defending world champions who are going to play in the World Cup? It wasn't intentional. They didn't mean to do it that way. They just didn't have the money. So I want to at least acknowledge that part of it. The other part of that is, though, there's got to be accountability for the fact that they have no money. This just doesn't make sense to me. And obviously, it needs to get fixed, and soon. Because you've got John Herdman out there talking about how the Federation needs to get serious and actually give him a chance to win a World Cup in 2026 when he's at home, and sort of support this team the way that it should be supported, as at this point one of the top 15 or so men's national teams in the world. They topped a CONCACAF qualifying group that had that U.S. team in it that everybody's so excited about. Now, I will continue to say I believe that U.S. team is far and away the most equipped in CONCACAF when it comes to tournaments. But if you're Canada, you're also thinking run to the quarterfinals, semifinals, give ourselves a shot to win this thing on home soil with a Jonathan David and a Kyle Larin who are going to be in their primes, and an Alfonso Davies in his prime, and all these young players who are coming up. It's only going to get better here. Qatar World Cup was not the high point for this group. Just like with the U.S., it was about breaking through, getting that experience, and setting the stage for 2026. And it's just been debacle after debacle. And then on the women's side, not only do you have these elite players and a team capable of winning this World Cup, I saw Janine Becky talking about the improvement in the depth, that they are not 100%. Janine Becky obviously is not participating in the tournament. But you still have plenty of players that are going to be on that plane that you feel good about. There is significant development on both the men's and women's sides within this program. And this is where they are now as legitimate threats, and especially the women, threats to win any competition they enter. And on the men's side, and for both of them, the second best team in their region. And Canada would be the best team in most regions on the women's side, but they've run into two really good U.S. teams. And so it's coming up short in CONCACAF W Championship, coming up short in the Nations League, losing in the final where you're clearly the team number 2, but not quite on the U.S.'s level when push comes to shove and the trophy's on the line. And you look at what the U.S. has been able to do, and it wasn't pretty, and it took a lot of hard work and sacrifice, and a lot of people paying the price beforehand to kind of pave the way for that CBA. But look at some of the support systems that are in place and the way that everybody seems to be pulling in the same direction here, at least from a men's and women's team perspective, and working with the federation. You listen to these players, it's been a lot of, the federation has done a really good job with XYZ. Not that everything's perfect, or that we're working with the federation on XYZ. Canada's fighting their federation because it's not able to provide the fundamental things that are required for success. These teams are having success in spite of their federation. And that's just a really sad reality that nobody should have to deal with, and especially teams on this level. You compare the experience of, we'll just take Janine Becky with Sophia Smith, her club teammate, and what their experiences in the national team are like right now. It's just incredibly disappointing. And if you're going to try and kind of elevate this, you got to get people who are actually willing to kind of take it on and want to be the person to take it forward. If John Herdman just gets fed up with it, for example, and all this nonsense that he, dealing with boycotts and it's just not enjoyable when you don't feel like you have the resources for success. And he clearly feels that way based on what he was saying after the Nations League. As opposed to, there's this idea at least thrown out there that, Pep Guardiola might come manage the U.S. men's national team one day. Who knows if it actually happens? But the federation is in a place where that is possible. Not right now, but they might be building toward that. Canada's players are, the depth isn't there, but that takes time. But they're best players on the same level as the U.S. I would take 3 Canadian players over 3 U.S. players. I stand by that. Alfonso Davies, the best player, the best striker, best player in the continent, and Jonathan Davis, the best striker in the continent. And it's just a completely different story than what you are seeing immediately to the south with the U.S. and the positive momentum that's being built here. I don't have any kind of analysis other than this is just really sad and they need to figure it out. Not just the CBA, but they need to figure out how to fund this thing and figure out what's going wrong and where this money is going. Because these players deserve so much better. And it's just heartbreaking to me that I feel like everybody knows that and agrees. It's not like you remove a person from this and all of a sudden things get better because that person had malicious intentions. It's just been a fundamental mishandling of finances and a fundamental failure in leadership. And as a professional player, as a gold medalist, as a Bayern Munich standout, you're not just going to sit there and take that, because you know what you could be and you know what you should have at your disposal, and you know all the ways your federation is failing you. So it's just one thing after another at this point. We'll see how the Gold Cup goes. They did get the draw, kind of like the U.S. Ultimately, it's just not a big deal. They should get out of their group just fine. But, if you have a bad Gold Cup on top of the bad vibes heading into the World Cup for the women and potential bankruptcy here, DeVos said not in the near future, but it's something you got to do your due diligence and explore. Somebody's got to figure this out because it is a mess.